second podcast of the day. Coffee.
I think you need an opening catchphrase.
Yeah, do I? Yeah, is that what it is? Okay, I got it. I haven't got a catchphrase. I'm just going to start.
Whatever you say now will have to be a catchphrase forever.
There's so much pressure now. My God.
Go on, this creativity podcast. You're a creative person. Rob, creative. No.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the podcast, which as of yet still actually doesn't really have a title. It might do by the time we release a podcast. Because
Creativity Cast.
You see, yeah. It's a bit obvious though, isn't it?
Creator Cast. That's always the same.
Is that it?
Creator Cast.
Creator Cast.
That's actually, I quite like that.
Creator Cast.
What about Creator Cast with a K? And then the other cast is with a K.
I feel it would be nice
because
to have
we're in
the word caterpillar in there somewhere as well.
With a K?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was that too far?
The word caterpillar is ruined with a K, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just ruined by it. Because right? A curly cur is a nice,
because
cute letter, isn't it?
A caterpillar is curly.
Kicking cur is just quite aggressive, isn't it?
But a caterpillar is curly in nature.
Yes, the sea suits the nature of the caterpillar.
I think I should just let this conversation go where it goes and see what happens.
I thought what would be a good topic I've always thought, right, that talent is to do with motivation. I think that people become, when they say they're talented, it's because they do the thing loads, and because they do it, they get good at it. I don't believe people are just born good at stuff like art. I don't think that's the case. I think it's because they do it that they get good, and that's been evidenced so by teaching people so often. If they just get their head down and do it a lot, I always say these contentious things. Rob's looking, his face is, those who are watching this can see Rob's wondering whether that's the case or not. But I think motivation is a key anyway for artists, and I think often artists feel that they're demotivated and they go through periods where they don't want to do any stuff, and then there's depression and anxiety, all that kicks in. And I think it's a very good exercise to talk about how you first got into being a creative person, an artist or a musician, because I think often when you talk about that can be very motivating. So shall we have a conversation or a discussion about how we first got into this and try and get to the source of that thing that made us want to do it, because that might be a very motivating thing for people who listen to this or watching it.
May well be. Who do we start with?
I think we should start with you, Rob, because you're in the middle.
Because I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
But we could do it that way. The way that people, it's always going to start with me.
Well,
we haven't.
If we go for Richard first, we know what we're going to get, aren't we?
Caterpillars.
Yeah.
Caterpillars, Bigfoots, scarves knitted by Tom Baker, designed by Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford's mom.
Yeah. Street.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't actually introduced ourselves in this one, so should we do that as we do So I'm Rob Groucutt. I am first and foremost a musician, and so I come from a musical family. A lot of people will probably know this. So it was kind of...
So you're going to say a lot of people would disagree with that?
Or maybe disagree.
Listening to your dad's records.
Potentially, I don't know. It could be quite divisive. But let's just say, but this is not the conversation about whether or not people think something's good. So obviously my sort of upbringing was very musical. And so it kind of became... I don't think it was necessarily about a motivation, but it was just something that I was sort of soaking up as a child. So then I just naturally then started just playing instruments and singing, and ended up. We don't need to do the life stories, do we necessarily? No. But ended up in one or another, going and training in music production mostly. The reason I chose production rather than performance was because I was always going to be playing. I was always playing music, and I was always going to play music. And then the thing that I didn't really know about was recording. And I thought, well, if I want to be able to record my stuff, I'd rather be able to know how to do that myself, so that I wouldn't have to spend the money that it costs to record. So that was the motivation for that. But then, after sort of finishing that, realising that actually I could make money by recording other people.
But going right back early, is there a
on.
point where you can remember, like, say, listening to music or something where you went, oh my God, I absolutely love this, and I really or because you're the one, you know, when people say
like a turning point. You think, like,
did you come from a musical family? Did you come from a musical family? Because I didn't
not at
particularly.
all.
No, but you did, didn't you? So
see, yeah,
was it just always there?
It was just always there. I don't think there was a point where it was like, oh, I've found this interest and now I want to explore this. It was like my brothers. I've got two brothers that were older than me, and the younger sister. So the brothers were having piano lessons. So we had a piano teacher would come to the house. They would have their however long, half an hour lesson each, but then he'd always do a little sort of 10, 15 minutes with me. And by the time I was old enough to be doing it, we didn't have the piano teacher anymore. But so it was always a thing that I kind of liked doing. And then even at school, there were things like where I'd learnt some things on piano lessons. I'd gone to keyboard lessons as well separately, and sometimes the teacher would say, "Well, do you want to play something on the piano?" And so it was always like that was just a thing. So, but it was never. I can't recall a point where I was like, I'm going to be a musician or work in music. In fact, the first thing that I went to study at college was computers, because I thought that's probably a better fallback plan. Not to go into too many details, but like when I told my dad that I decided to go and do music, his response was, "That's great, but you're not going to make any money." So, and this is a career. This is like a lifelong career musician, but of course, because there was a perception, and is still very much a perception, that it's not necessarily the most lucrative of avenues to get in. But then, sort of later, I mean, we're talking now about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that I started to get into photography and realised kind of quickly that actually, I think my motivation wasn't just about music, it was actually just about being creative in general, because that ended up sort of scratching an itch that I didn't have a home studio at the time, so I just basically I could still be creative by picking up a camera and going photographing anything. It was much easier accessible, and that scratched the itch, and then just developed then a sort of side career with photography as well, which has then become I mean, here's the question. It's like, I always said it was photography and videography, but I never liked that word videographer, so I don't know if it's just filmmaker. Is that too pretentious a word to use? Say, I've made short films, but...
What's interesting to me, because I'm the same as you, and we haven't got to Richard yet, but I don't necessarily have to do music to scratch the creative itch. But there was a certain period of time when I was a kid where my obsession for music was insane. It was absolutely, it was just so huge, and other art forms didn't, figure in that. Now I'm older, that's not so much there, but it's interesting that you, almost like the opposite, that you have music all around you. That's like, so it's almost like it's literally a given, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's there's a creative desire there. I mean, and this may be an undercurrent of this conversation, is how much is it in the genes and how much is it your upbringing? Because obviously, all your two brothers both were musicians, weren't they? What about your sister? Did she?
She plays basic guitar and sings, and not career wise, but like and I think part of that is just the accessibility, because there were guitars and bass guitars and pianos. Not piano, the one piano in the house. So it was like, I think the issue which we'll get onto, I guess, with you guys is where, because those things are accessible, it's like, I can go and pick that up. Whereas I know a lot of people that got into music but had to get an instrument, or the parents would have to buy an instrument, and so that's a sort of barrier that some people just don't get the chance to have.
Did your parents actively encourage you to pick up those instruments, or was it just that they were around and they just let you explore on your own?
I think the latter. I think I don't recall sort of conversations where there'd be encouragement. Like, I don't think there was anything like that. I think it was just, and it was like record player was playing stuff, and so my dad was listening to like old rock and roll stuff and Beatles and.
I know you hate to do this, but I don't think the listeners can get in context unless they know who your dad is, because it's not like you had two parents that did a bit of music.
No.
So it's worth saying who your dad was.
So my dad was Kelly Groucutt, who was the bass player and vocalist for Electric Light Orchestra from 1973 to 1982, something like that. So that's
So he was seriously.
so it was like
involved in
it was
music, yeah.
and fringe things after that as well. So I mean, from the point, I mean, even just before that, that was his thing. Was he was a musician. He was a club musician, and then a touring musician, and that was till the end of his life. So and again, because it's not, I don't think any conversations needed to happen, because it was just like, we'll just, and then there'd be points where it was like we'd all sit around and just play little things or sing together and harmonise and things like that. That was a little later when I was a teenager, but from when I was a teenager. But I don't think there's sort of like a conversation whether. But I mean, it's difficult now being a parent myself. I know that there are things that you do where you encourage your children to do something without having a conversation. You just allow the exploration of that.
I got a funny feeling that what it is the music. So if you're in a household where there's music and you're hearing music, then if you're hearing good music, then that does affect you.
Yeah.
And obviously you had like loads of good music in the house and you're hearing music all the time. I think that's a factor in it. But when you got into music, was it the same music that your dad liked or your family liked, or was there a rebelliousness there where you got into something else and your dad was like, oh, I don't like this? Because that...
Yeah, I think, because when I first started, I think really listening to music, like choosing my own music to listen to, I think it was still a bit of influence from my brother, because we shared a room. So he'd start listening to Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Nirvana, and that. And I think that's where I then started to develop my own. Well, not necessarily my own sense of what I liked, Rage Against the Machine as well. So it was all heavier stuff than anything my dad had really done. But I think that was probably the spark of me being able to go and then I'm going to find. So I'd listen to all this stuff before, the close harmony stuff and the sonograph and all that, and then at the point where I go, oh, there's this music which was never exposed to me as a child, as a young child. I think then that's the thing that then opened me to go, oh, okay, I'll start listening to, and then getting into the sort of, the Brit indie stuff, like the early stuff, like, Wonder Stuff, Ned's Top Dustbin, and Populate Itself, the three local Starbridge heroes. And so it came, I think at that point was where it opened up and became a bit more eclectic, I think. And then when I started making music myself, it was more sort of folky, acoustic-driven stuff. Like there was a period I was massive into Jack Johnson at the time when he'd come out. So it was like
the boxer or the
singer-songwriter, yeah. But just to clarify that, and bands like Turing Break. So it was like, again, it was like there's the harmony stuff in there, but it was much more lighter than the stuff like the Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that. But yeah, so but again, I think that was the point when I decided to come and do music as a as a qualification as well. So it was like, I think that was that turning point where it was like, that was it. The sort of the brain opened up to a lot more things. I think I've never really thought about a point where it happened. It just kind of
it's just so different to me, because what you have just literally been given this musical life that's there from the dot. It's all around you, and it's almost like you're going to do it, and there's no choice.
And we've said this to students before. It's like you don't really have a choice. I was trying to do computers because I thought that would be the, where the money. In fact, I know it was where a lot of money was. But I did 1 year at university, and I enjoyed it, but it was like, I don't really enjoy this to carry on doing this for another 3 years or whatever the course was. So it was like, that was the point I just decided, okay, it's just a career change. And then at that point, it was like, not to go really sort of spiritual with it, but it felt much more at home. Like I was home then. It was like, I'm just around music, which is what I was, coming back from university doing computers, and then coming back and then playing music or listening to music. It's like, so when you end up going and doing that all day, every day, just that, I don't think I'd realised until the point I made that decision that was actually really what I should have done straight away. I don't regret it, but it's like, but it is that thing where there's a realisation. I think that's a journey I had to go on to really understand it. I think maybe.
Yeah. But so what the only sort of revelational bit of this is when you tried to do something else and then went, oh no,
maybe this is
you know. So
I mean, it's helped me because I'm still a geek when it comes to
yeah,
to computers and setting up studio equipment and stuff like that. All of that stuff with computers, because that's so fundamental now. That's actually helped me, so I'm grateful for that. But I think you're right. It is just that sort of it's just not going to work like that. I've got to be creative basically, and I don't think that allowed my brain to do that. I think. Is that enough of
I think so.
A life story for me?
Who's going to go next? Do you want to go next week?
You go, Rick?
Can do, yes. So I think my earliest creative memories or creative endeavours were not musical at all, but would be writing. I used to write little stories, and these stories would always be sort of, I don't know, fantastical.
Can you give us an example of a story that you wrote? Can you remember?
Oh, I can't remember. They'd be heavily influenced by like Greek myths.
How old were you when you were heavily influenced by Greek myths?
35.
About 6 or 7, or that sort of age.
Yeah.
And you watch the Clash of the Titans.
Yes.
Yes.
All the Harryhausen. Is it Harryhausen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Clash of Titans.
I can remember. I think it was Tom Hanks that he was saying his Citizen Kane was Jason and the Argonauts, and that's exactly my Citizen Kane as well. That's my Citizen Kane moment.
But I remember watching all those films, and then I'd get books out of the library that would have all the stories in them, and I'd basically just rewrite the stories, but with me in them.
Did you model yourself? Did you model yourself on any of the Greek gods?
No, I would just be a child.
Because you obviously have now, haven't you?
Yes. I would just be a child in the story, and like whoever the hero of the story was, that would be my best friend.
Unable to grow a beard at 6, because obviously Richard couldn't grow a beard. He was about 8 or 9 when he. He had to take the role of the child. Obviously,
you probably would have been older than 6. I don't know how old are you when you can sort of write properly, so to speak.
I would say
15.
No, I would
it was
say
definitely primary school.
Yeah,
my daughter is really big into writing,
like a page of or a couple of pages of A4.
Yeah, that'd be about right. She from about 7, I think she was writing.
So I'd write these stories, but I'd make them into little books, and I'd
you'd actually make the book.
Yeah, and draw the cover on and everything.
Do you have any of these books now?
No, they've all been gone. And then what I'd also do is I'd get cardboard boxes and cut slots in the top, which I'd put paper through and make little theatres, so that you'd have like different backgrounds, and then I'd have little figures that would come in from the side and curtains, and I'd make my own little theatres that told the stories that were in the books.
I mean, the thing is, you laugh about it, but it's so creative, though. That's the thing for a kid to do.
Crayon.
Yeah.
Wax crayon.
Yeah. That's
I think there's two facets of art, and one of them is the sort of the feeling part of it, which music tends to be much more about feelings.
Yeah.
And then there's another part of art, which is the story part of it, and these two.
Yeah.
And I really think that to if you're doing music, you need a lot more story in it.
Yeah.
And if you're writing stories, obviously you've got to have but that's the feeling element. Those two things. And for me, when I came to art, it was all about the feeling, the emotional thing. The story part of it, I wasn't so interested. But it sounds like you were really interested in the story part.
Well, I think I always have been very interested in writing and stories. And I have tried writing my own novel on a number of occasions and got to so far and then given up on a number of occasions. But when it comes to music, I'm probably the opposite. So I'm less interested in the story.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where I'm more drawn to instrumental music than I am lyrical music. And as we've spoken about in the past, I often will block out lyrics entirely at times.
No, I think I was like that originally. I think before I started writing, I didn't really pay that much attention to.
Yeah,
I had to train myself to listen to lyrics.
Yeah,
and it was Joni Mitchell, because all the musicians went on about Joni Mitchell, and you got to get to Joni Mitchell. And I went and got Hijira, and I didn't get it at all. And I was going, what's the other? Because I was expecting it to sound like Weather Report or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I worked at it. And then one day I thought, well, I wonder what she's actually singing about. And I started to listen to what she was singing about. And then suddenly I got it.
Yeah.
Because the music was sort of referring to what she was singing.
Yeah.
That was like a revelation.
Yeah.
Although from the year dot, I was a massive Frank Zappa fan.
Yeah.
But his lyrics just, it was a completely different.
There's a lot more metaphor and
yeah.
sort of,
It just seemed much more obvious that you listened to the lyrics. It wasn't, with Frank Zappa, because it was funny basically. And I've always liked stuff with a sense of humour, even music. And if any music's is funny, I like it. It's just automatic. But what was your sort of early musical? How did
that progress?
So I would say there was always music on in the house as a child.
What would it be?
It would have been Status Quo.
Uh-huh.
And my dad was a massive Status Quo fan, and we had this big record player in the lounge, and so it would usually be of an evening. I guess probably like weekends that he'd just put some music on and just all dance around the lounge and whatnot, and then eventually go to bed. And interestingly, when Orla was born, in the the first few months of having her at home, I played a lot of Status Quo to her, and it sort of it seemed kind of right.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time it doesn't, does it?
Well, strangely, it was very sort of I don't know. It was nostalgic, and
Status Quo. I absolutely love it.
It just completely transported me back to being a kid dancing around the room with my parents, and now I was there with my own kid listening to the same songs that I've probably never listened to since I was that age. Also, it seemed to be a lot of the time it was the only thing that would get her to stop crying and go to sleep.
With most people,
the opposite effect. I think it's all to do with the
I'm only
rhythm.
joking about Status Quo, by the way. I'm only joking. I love them.
No, it's interesting. Just a sidetrack on that, because it's interesting you said that, because I don't think I ever did that with music, although we play my dad's music to my kids. But Battlestar Galactica, believe it or not, that because I remember watching that with my dad and my brothers, like when I was a kid, and then they did like a reboot thing, and that was when my daughter was like 2 or 3 that had come out. Actually, probably earlier than that. So now, obviously, she's too young to understand any of it. But I remember when that came out, I was like, I watched this, and I had that same sort of regression thing. And I'm like, I'm watching.
Yeah.
It was the new version of it, but it was like.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to send your mind into this sort of regression.
Yeah.
It's